Indiana Outdoor Adventures TV show is coming on, and don't you know they've got a new adventure planned just for you. You'll be wishing you were in the Indiana outdoors too. It may be hunting, could be fishing, or keeping alive some old tradition from the days of long ago. Well, head on out, without a doubt, with us you can go on the Indiana Outdoor Adventures TV show.
We're in Parke County today for the Covered Bridge Festival, and this is an annual event that brings tens of thousands?
A million, they say.
A million.
A million,
people
10 days.
Parke County in 10 days.
Right.
You know, it's a phenomenal event. It's one of the largest festivals anywhere in Indiana. And joining me today is Jim Meese. And Jim, tell me a little bit about who you are and what role this is that you play in the festival.
Well, I've been a vendor here in the county since I was 7 years old. My mother started making sassafras candy. My stepdad made maple syrup. So when this thing started back in 1957, we were one of the original booths, and we've been going every year since then. Haven't missed one yet.
So you've been to all 57 of them?
All 57.
I found it interesting. This is the 57th annual one, and
first.
It's amazing.
From the first time on, yep. It's changed over the years. The first year they had this back in 1957, what had happened, the county got kind of beaten up. They'd lost a couple of big employers, and they had a big flood. Farmers got beaten up, so people were trying to find a way to help themselves a bit. So they thought maybe a farmer's market kind of thing might help the farmers. So they were trying to think of some ideas. And a lady named, she was married to a man named Charles Sanders, had visited here. She's an older lady. She came back and wanted to show her grandkids where the covered bridges were and stuff. She lived in Indianapolis then, and she couldn't find her way around, couldn't find the bridges. So she wrote to a newspaper man here in town and asked him why there wasn't some information about that. And that kind of kicked the idea off with some folks. Well, maybe somebody cared about coming and seeing these old things. You know how it is. Wherever you live, you take it all for granted, so nobody counted anything. So that's how they started. And so in 1957, they met for a weekend. Had about 250 people or so show up. They thought it was great to have that many people come up for the festival.
Big turnout for a
big
time.
turnout. And they thought, well, what if it had rained? It would have been rained out. So they decided to go 2 weekends. So in '58, they changed it to the second and third weekends in October. It's been the same thing ever since. And then about 10 years into it, they decided, well, we're all set up for both weekends. Why don't we just go the weekend between two? So it's been 10 days now for about 55, 54 years, I suppose.
Now, the lady from Indianapolis that wanted to come and show where the covered bridges were, she's not the only one, obviously, that's interested in them, but what do you think is it that captures the imagination or the intrigue that we have for covered bridges?
You know, that's a great question. I get asked a lot of times as a county commissioner what they think it's really great that we were so wise to preserve all these old artifacts, you know. And
you brought them in from other places.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then we had to explain, well, it's not a matter of being wise, it was just we were poor, so the bridges had lasted. We have some bridges that are 150 years old. They've been working fine. Those covered bridges, the covering over the wood has allowed that wood to last forever. Plus, the bridges are built with a dual. There's two support systems there. There's the arch system as well as the freestanding system itself, so they just don't fall down. Now, we've had several. We had as many as 60 at one time, but we've had several get washed away or tornadoes damaged, that kind of thing. But we've still got 31 that we actively use that function. So I think people are attracted just to the old structure, that it's lasted that long, and kind of the mystique around the old things. So when they started the festival, they thought we should make it maybe a turn of the century kind of a thing to go with that same time period, and it's carried on since.
Now, there's how many covered bridges?
31.
And are they all original
Yes.
locations?
Yes. Now, we have one that we moved last year out by the Sanatorium Bridge. The bridge upstream had been damaged a couple times, lost a couple times. That one had been a private bridge. That company went out of business, the sanitarium went out of business, so we moved that bridge. It's been damaged, but we moved it upstream about a mile, but that's the only one that's different. But it was originally right there. It just moved about a mile upstream so it could go back into use, and it's being used today.
Now, are most of the bridges the 1850 to 1880s period construction, or?
We have some clear up in the 19-teens.
Okay.
Yeah. 1856, I think, was the first one, the Crooks Bridge, about 1856. The first bridge in Indiana, actually, you think about these going way back, 1700s now, but they were created. The first one, I think, was in Indianapolis over the White River, and that was, I think, 1836, 1838, sometime around there.
That's pretty early.
It is, yeah.
You know, and before that, obviously, the people just forded the creeks.
Yes.
And then they started getting a little more elaborate as settlements grew. Farmers needed a way to get across. Buggies coming into town.
And what they really needed to get to were the mills. And the mills are always built at ford areas because you have to build a mill on solid rock foundation so it won't vibrate and tilt and fall over. So it's always on bedrock. That's always where the fords were because it hadn't washed out deeper. It was always shallow. And then they finally realized, you know, look, farmers can only get across to our side where the mill is when the water's not high. So then they begin to build the bridges, and that's where it came. Then the towns spring up around the mills. While you're in town, you need to go to a hardware store or whatever you need to do, and that's where they all came from.
The festival, now it's grown from this interest of historic structures.
Right.
And I understand that I've been out on the red trail and the yellow trail.
Right.
How are the trails set up if somebody wants to come and good luck seeing all of them?
Really?
It takes a little while.
It does. There's 4 separate routes. Used to be, you would try to do it in a day or two, but there's 31. It's a big county to cover if you're going to stop and see anything while you're there. So the idea came together. There's a group called Parke County Incorporated that was organized back in the early 60s. Somebody had to organize this Covered Bridge Festival. It's growing pretty big in the 50s, in the early 60s. And so that was a group of volunteers that just got together to try to organize it. And someone decided we need to break it down into some manageable size. So they created a route to cover the northeast, the northwest, and the southeast and southwest. And each route has 6 or 7 bridges on it. Each of them goes through towns. In the beginning, Rockville was the center. Everything was in Rockville. You could hardly get through Rockville in those days. And so it's been a good thing now that the outside towns have also begun to have events going on there. So there's big stuff going on in Bridgeton, Mansfield, Rosedale, Montezuma, Bloomingdale, Tangier, things all over the county. So it's great.
Now, I know we've been to Bridgeton before and visited the 1822 house?
Yes.
And a nice little pioneer cabin, but they've kind of built up a little sub-festival type of thing, so you don't have to come into downtown.
No, you don't. Rockville is the center of the Covered Bridge Festival, but all those places are all associated with the Covered Bridge Festival. They're all partners. They all work together to try to get these things organized.
Now, around the town hall, right outside, in fact, we've had pouring down rain this morning. The storms are passing through, so we're inside doing an interview, but we're going back out into it's almost like a tent city surrounding.
It is.
In here in the square surrounding the courthouse. How many vendors do you have, and what are some of the variety of things that are out there?
And in the county together, we'll have a couple thousand vendors with different things. Here at Rockville particularly, we try to really not control what comes in, but to jury what's coming in. So people have to, and we try not to have duplication. So if someone's come in and they've got a craft, we try not to have any duplication, so we won't have 15 or 20 of the same thing. And so we encourage the handmade items. But under the tent and on the square, there'll probably be 200 vendors, I suppose, here with different items. All the organizations in town, like Eastern Star or some church groups or Boy Scouts, River and Park, a high school band, supporters, they all have stands out here too, and they all sell different food. There is no duplication of food on the square either. It's all different. And you can get anything from baked potatoes to corn on the cob to gizzards and livers to curlers. And it's just
I've already had sugar maple cookies. I'm going to have some sassafras tea.
Oh, now we're talking. Now we're talking.
You know, a lot of these unique things. And my point being that even though it was raining this morning, it doesn't matter because of the tent. You guys have provided well in advance.
That's right.
So that with 1 million people coming in 10 days, they still have something to do even if the weather turned inclement. Now, we also like to pick this time of the year because of the fall foliage.
Right.
It's beautiful for backdrops, for covered bridge photos. We were here filming in the spring. We're going to go out and film a little more in the fall. And, you know, there's just so much to see and do in Parke County any time of the year, from the Sugar Maple Festival in the spring to you have a new mushroom festival. And, of course, we're here for the Covered Bridge Festival.
Right.
Welcome back to Indiana Outdoor Adventures. We're out in Parke County, Indiana today at the Covered Bridge Festival in the Covered Bridge capital of the world, Parke County. And David and his son Luke are my tour guides today, showing me around the 30-plus covered bridges in Clark County. We probably won't do all of them today.
No,
probably not all of them. David, you've lived in Parke County a long time. What can you tell me about covered bridges? Why do people like them so much?
Oh, I think just the history and the design, the way they're made.
Yeah.
It just
You cross a covered bridge and it's like crossing back into time.
Yeah.
It's so different than any other bridge that we have. You've got the big truss bridges. There's all kinds of giant bridges like the out in California, the San Francisco Bridge. I mean, giant Colossus type bridges. But there's something about the historic covered bridge. Now, you have a campground here in Parke County.
Yes.
It's the Peaceful Waters Campground. And obviously it's a great time of the year to come and camp, bring your RV or to camp, because we've got Turkey Run State Park, we've got Shade State Park, we've got the Covered Bridge Festival here in October. You've got a lot of different things you offer at the campground, and I'm assuming that you probably get pretty busy this time of year.
Oh, this is our big time of the year. We make close to half our money in 2 weeks.
You know,
Bridge Festival.
It's really nice when a county can see a tourism boost from historically preserving something. So many times things get torn down because they're old to make room for new. Well, in Parke County, they've embraced the heritage and have saved all these covered bridges. What does it mean to have the Covered Bridge Festival here in Bridgeton?
Well, it means that my wife and I can buy this old mill, save it, restore it, and carry on. There's no way we could have done this without this festival.
And how long have you been working on that?
18 years.
That's a long time. What have you had to do?
Right after we bought it, the foundation collapsed. We had to put glass in the windows. We've had to restore the dam. That was one of our last big projects. The estimate for the dam was $750,000. We don't have that, so we did it ourselves. It took us 4 years with a lot of volunteers helping us, and we spent a little over $50,000. We've had to restore the foundation, the gates. There was 5 gates. We've restored 3 of them. We've restored the machinery. The family I bought the mill from was doing somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 pounds a year. Their grandfather was the miller here from 1938 until he passed away. We bought it from his widow. She was 82. She told me other people were looking at the mill as maybe a bed and breakfast or maybe a restaurant, and I could tell she did not want them people to buy it because they were trying to keep up the continuous operation. It's been open every year since 1823. I promised her we were going to save the mill, restore it, and carry on. And she said, Michael, I want you to have the mill because I know you're going to do good. And she wrote us a check for half of the down payment. I asked the family for the keys, and they changed the subject. And I said, what's going on? And they said, we're going to teach you how to run that old mill. And I said, now there's a good idea. I didn't ask them again. We owned the place for about 3 days, didn't have the keys to it. They taught me how to do all the maintenance, the milling, and their grandfather's recipes.
That's an exciting story. How heartbreaking was it to have the covered bridge burn?
Oh, that was devastating. It just totally senseless. The silver lining is the fact that the mill itself didn't burn. We still don't understand why it did. They're so close together. The windows were actually falling out of the building. And it just did a lot of damage to the mill, but it did not catch fire. And then we had thousands of people come together to put the bridge back up. It was restored my faith in people.
It's a heartwarming story to hear how the community and people outside the community came together to rebuild that bridge.
Oh, it's wonderful. I didn't believe it was possible. The estimate was like $1.5 million. The material alone was estimated $800,000. Almost all the material was donated. There's nearly 300 trees in that bridge. Every one of them was donated.
In thinking of the Covered Bridge Festival, we've got 10 days of people coming to see Bridgeton and the covered bridges. How many people do you think are here in town during those 10 days and come into the mill?
Well, nobody's selling tickets, but I would estimate around 100,000 people a day in Bridgeton.
100,000
per day.
Per day
in Bridgeton. Well, you take this number of people and then you spread it over about a square mile here, you got a lot of people. Sometimes on Saturdays, we can have 15 to 20 mile traffic jams. Unbelievable.
That's exciting, though.
Yes, it is.
It's the largest festival in Indiana.
Yes.
It's the covered bridge capital of the world.
Yes.
And you're right here in the heart of it.
And yes, today we are. When I first bought it, newspapers, TV said thank you for calling, but never heard of this place. Even the Historical Society accused me of building a brand new building and trying to fool the public. They told me I ought to be ashamed of myself. It took 2 years just to get the building recognized. Today, it has become what it should have been, one of the main attractions of the festival and even Indiana. It's becoming a well-known, beautiful historic site.
It's probably one of the most photogenic opportunities of all the covered bridges
Oh, yes.
and many places in the state of Indiana.
Oh, I believe so. Yes, I've always believed it. I saw this back in the 70s, and I tried to imagine what did it look like when it was new. It had to be gorgeous, and it's taken 18 years to get here. We've still got a long way to go, but at least the building's safe and sound, and we have good business. We're doing about 25,000 pounds of product a year right now.
Kathy, tell me just a little bit about the Covered Bridge Festival here in Rockville.
Well, this is our 57th year. It's been going on since 1957. It was a 3-day event at that time, 2 weekends, and it has grown to be a county-wide event now that is for 10 days.
Great. And what all is there to do? If I was coming from somewhere outside of Parke County, what would bring me here?
Well, a lot of people like to come to the Covered Bridge Festival. It's become a tradition. Families come back year after year. And what they like to do when they get here is go out through the countryside, see the beautiful covered bridges in fall foliage. It's a great time to take pictures. Our bridges are here all the time and they're beautiful, but in the fall, that a little extra color just seems to make people draw them to the covered bridges. And they're a piece of history that's right here in front of us that we can use on a daily basis. And people like to be able to see history, just not know about it or see where it was at. That history is right here in front of them. So people will come to see the covered bridges. We have 5 color-coded routes that they can drive, and we have plenty of maps and brochures to be able to help direct them throughout the county. As they travel out through the countryside, they'll stop at different communities that have a specialty. For instance, Tangier, they serve berried beef. Bloomingdale makes homemade apple butter. You go to Mecca, next to the one-room schoolhouse, and learn its history. Rosedale has the treasures filled in the Florida Civic Center. Mansfield and Bridgeton are big hosts to several crafters and vendors, and also home to covered bridges and mills. And the headquarters of it all is Rockville. In Rockville, you can take even bus tours out through the countryside. We drive you so that you don't have to do the driving. On the big tent under the courthouse lawn, you'll find some of the crafters and vendors that have been there since the very first festival. So people like to come to Parke County for a wide variety of reasons, but I guess you could put it in a nutshell and say you have covered bridges that are historical structures, you have shopping, and lots of great food.
Helen, we're in your booth, and I'm surrounded by happy gourds. They're all smiling at me. And did you carve all of these?
Yes, I did.
Tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, I grow gourds. Basically, I grow gourds for artists all over the U.S., and most of the time I'm shipping. You know, they'll call and tell me what type of gourd art they want to do, and then they'll tell me how many gourds they need, and I put them in a box and ship them out. And then this show here, the Covered Bridge Festival, I do a lot of artwork to help pay for my harvest.
Oh, okay.
Because it costs a lot of money to pick these gourds.
Yeah.
So this way I can make some money and pay for my harvest.
Now, I didn't ask you right off the bat, but I know people are going to want to know. Tell me about your hat.
Well, many years ago, the ladies down here wore bonnets.
Okay.
It was a requirement. And they let me wear an outfit, my bib overalls with gourds all over them.
Because you're always out farming and you're the sand lady, right?
Yeah, but this was a special pair I wore for this Covered Bridge Festival. So I thought, I need a bonnet, but I don't want a cloth bonnet. So I went out there and looked down the roll of gourds, thinking I would make a bonnet. So I walked down there and that one won't work, that one won't work. I think this one will work because, you know, it has to be, say, 6 inches wide, and this has to be wider up here. Took that up the house and just, you know, freehand it real quick, hand it to Ron, said, hey, Ron, cut this out for me. And I just knocked that old stuff out of the insides of it and stuck it on my head, and a perfect fit. I call that a God thing.
That was really good. A gourd thing or a God thing?
We use both. I never saw that.
Not only are you a Parke County Commissioner,
Right.
but you're also a history teacher at the
Right.
local high school.
Yep.
And I know you have this big interest in history. For people who don't know much about covered bridges, I was always told, you know, tulip poplar was a big
It is.
lumber used.
It is.
Because they grew tall and straight.
That's exactly it. Yep.
What other unique things about the covered bridge would be of interest to people of history?
Well, most of the covered bridge, almost all the bridges, with the exception of one, were built with the materials right there on site. Just cut the timber there. And you're right, the poplar was used. Another unique thing about the poplar is that bugs don't eat it, termites don't eat it, so it's not bothered. It has some kind of toxin. We built our house out of poplar beams, so it's all, that's a good reason for it. The flooring is always made of oak. Because the oak holds up better than that. Yes, absolutely. And the roof typically would have been metal. Now we still have some that's got that has the wood shingles on it.
The shingles?
Yes. But that was really early. Once metal came along, metal was always the choice to put on. So they were almost always tin roofs. So as we redo them now, we're replacing them with metal roofs to go back to what it was.
It makes sense. I mean, the whole reason they were built was to keep the wood from rotting.
That's exactly it.
Why build a wood roof?
That's exactly it. People ask a lot of times, why are they covered? And they thought, some people think, well, so horses would go through like it was a barn or whatever. But no, really the whole purpose was from Burr, when he created the Burr arch, was if you can protect that wood, the only thing that rots wood is it gets wet and dry and wet and dry. So if you can keep it dry all the time or keep it wet all the time underwater, it lasts forever too. But it's just when it's wet and dry and wet and dry. So these have been doing this for 150, 160 years. They're doing pretty well.
Now, there's a little over 90 covered bridges in Indiana. Why are a third of them in Parke County?
Well, I think two reasons. One, we are the end of the moraine of the glaciers as they came down. So we are a very hilly area. So we just had to have access. And in those hilly moraine areas, there was little bedrock to be reached, so you just couldn't ford them. It was always muddy, always gravelly, so you couldn't do that. And then the second reason is we're just a poor county, and they've always worked for all these years. There was no reason to replace them with the concrete and steel bridges we have today in so many places because they were doing their job. Now, we've had a few in the county that when the bridge has been lost to a flood or a tornado, in fact, we had one burned that we had to replace with a concrete and steel, because as a commissioner, you just can't justify spending tax dollars to build an inadequate bridge. You're going to have to spend on something that the farmers can use.
Because of the weight load.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sure. You can't get a combine through those covered bridges anymore, you know, so you have to be responsible that way. But in those cases, we have 5 bridges that we preserve the bridges and build a modern bridge beside it, just set them aside. So we didn't tear them down and put a concrete bridge in its place. If it was savable, we just bypassed it and went beside it.
You want to keep that claim of the most covered bridges?
That's right.
What is it? It's the covered bridge
capital of the world. Yeah, yep.
You want to keep that? There's no reason to tear them down.
No, there's not.
They're historic structures that we find very aesthetically pleasing to the eye. They just have an essence of history to them. We're drawn to them. There's like a magnetism about them. We just love covered bridges.
And I think probably the best example of that is when the Bridgeton Bridge was burnt and we built it back, we had, everything was volunteered. It's about $1.5 million bridge that we built. We spent $200,000 on that, is all we did, and that was all donated money. All the rest was by volunteers donating. My wife and I gave 25 big poplar trees, for example. It took about 200. We had people donate all their time. We had a company in Indianapolis that runs the mills, makes those little wood miser mills, sawmills.
Right.
They donated all the blades. We had 3 guys who brought their saws and sawed it up. We had 3 lumber companies who volunteered their time to go harvest trees that people had donated. They brought them to Bridgeton. We sawed them up. Had about 13 people who spent all the time putting that bridge together. And that was one of the greatest things in my life, of a group coming together for one purpose, to do a good thing. And it wouldn't have happened if they didn't care about it. And I took my history class down. My history classes, these are juniors now, juniors in high school, they wanted to participate. So I took my class down there. I got a field trip, and we painted all the siding after they got it sawn. We painted all that siding before we put it up. And they didn't get it all done the first day. In fact, the kids probably had more paint on them than they did on the boards. Learning experience, yeah. And they asked if they can come back the next day and finish up. And so I said, well, I doubt they'll let us, but I'll ask. But the board said yes. So we went back a second day. And so those kids painted. Now, they have some ownership in that bridge, and they have some pride in that. That's exactly right, yep.
Yeah. If you haven't been to Parke County in a long time, I suggest that you put it on the agenda for your travel plans and come on out and experience a little bit of it. Jim, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, you bet.
I know you've got more sassafras tea to sell.
Yes, we do.
We'll get back out into the booth. We'll see you next time, right here on Indiana Outdoor Adventures.